Warhol's story had the fairy tale elements that America loved. He grew up in a strongly Catholic immigrant family, which had come to the United States from the mountains on the borders of Russia and Czechoslovakia.
They grew up in a somewhat of a section of Pittsburgh, a Slovak section. It was a difficult time for families then. I mean, he grew up during the Depression. The family was a working class family. Andy's father died when he was probably around 12 years old, and my father at the time was 18, and so my father took over the responsibilities of a father in supporting the family. Andy's mother, as I view it, she probably had the most influence on Andy when he was growing up, and I always saw her as being the creative talent that maybe Andy got his creativity from. Andy, when he was younger, he had a nervous condition. Andy's mother, Julia, worked with him and helped him with sketching and kind of kept him busy. But I think she was probably the most influential one all the way up until she passed away. She lived with him for approximately 20 years. And also, Andy liked her handwriting so much, and it was very decorative, and he'd often have her sign his name and do a lot of the inscriptions on the illustrations.
In 1945, Andrew Warhola, as he was then known, became the first member of his family to go to college when he won a place to study art at Carnegie Tech in Pittsburgh.
My father has a few paintings that he's treasured since Andy left Pittsburgh in 1949. These paintings are ones he did in school, and I think they're some of his most interesting work since they're all hand-painted.
One of the people who seemed to fade into the background was Andy Warhol, or Warhola, as his name was at that time. And he emerged, however, in my recollection, very strongly as a marvelous drawer. I mean, he could draw beautifully. Andy, in a way, could only go his own route, so that you would see a continuity between the work he did in college and the work he's done all his life.
Andrew Warhola's ambition was to be a painter, but in 1949, when he graduated, he was attracted by the glamour of New York, where he changed his name to Andy Warhol and plunged into the commercial art world.
First printed piece was in Glamour, and prophetically it was about an article on success. And essentially that was illustrations of ladders and people climbing ladders and shoes on ladders. The shoes seemed to emerge early in his career. He became the best shoe drawer in New York City. He was probably a dream to work with, because he never objected when the client asked him to change something. He, in fact, liked the idea that he was directed. I believe, to the end, I don't think he knew when a thing was good or bad. I think he had to be told.
Although Andy Warhol became a hugely successful commercial artist, his ambition was always to make it as a painter. But in 1961, when he met the dealer Ivan Karp, he was still unsure of the direction his work should take.
I went to the back of the space, and there were two bodies of work. First picture I think I saw was the painting in the corner here of Dick Tracy and a cohort. I said, well, you know, if you're going to deal with very brutish imagery like this, and believe me, the art world's going to find this very hard to take, because this was not the prevailing tradition. In fact, there was no imagery in the prevailing tradition. The artists working with imagery during that interval were considered outsiders. The dominant force was abstract expressionism. And the great heroes, of course, were Jackson Pollock and de Kooning, Klein, Rothko, everybody's heroes, you know. And that was what you had to paint. You had to paint expressive style out of your soul, you know. The idea of doing images, blank, blunt, bleak, stark images like this was contrary to the whole prevailing mood of the arts. But it gave me a chill seeing it, and in the vast intellectual, perceptual abilities that I had, I said, my word, this is an amazing idea. It's just the opposite of what we see these days, you know. He said, well, do you really like them? I said, well, they are astonishing, but I like some better than others. He said, well, which ones? I said, well, some of the paintings here have all kinds of drip marks. And he said, well, you have to do that. You must drip. I said, well, why must you drip? He said, well, it means that you're an artist if you drip. And then, of course, you're paying homage to Pollock and all the great dripsters, you know? And I said, well, no, you don't have to drip. Maybe you don't have to drip at all. Maybe if you're going to deal with these kind of simple images, why don't you just deal with them in God's name? You know, that was my program for him already. He said, oh, that's just wonderful that you should say that. He said, because I don't think I want to drip.
Before you started the silkscreen, you made a number of paintings, and you made comic strips, right?
Oh yes, I made comic strips. Before I did the silkscreen things.
And you made some other paintings of things that were not done mechanically. What were they?
I made, I guess they were ads from magazines.
And then you made...
and then I made...
things like...
For a commercial artist to attempt to be taken seriously as a fine artist is very unusual. Now, not only did Andy, who was a famous commercial artist, come into the art world making no bones about the fact that he'd been a commercial artist, but he used as his subject matter the very subject matter of commercial art, i.e. advertisements or products. This was doubly shocking. This was like slapping someone in the face and then throwing up some boiling water in their face afterwards just to make sure they got the point.
I mean, do you ever bother to read all these great interpretations about your work?
Can I just answer?
Yes, you can. Back in 1962, or 61 or 62, around in then, when you and Rosenquist and Lichtenstein all were working very independently of each other, but evolving a same kind of attitude. Does that seem odd to you, that you all began to look at the world in the same way?
I think we just read a lot of comic books. And it just happened to come out then.
Well,
because comic books make things the way they are really today. I mean, the way things happen in New York now, it's like being in a Western movie.
Well, if you understood the mood of the American art scene at that point, this was totally contrary to it, you know. There was a sense of buoyancy and optimism in this work, and it was all about observing things outside of the self. These were objects from the daily world, from the commercial world. And if somebody was going to look at objects, why would they look at these unholy things, you know? So it was a total outrage, essentially, in the corpus of art of that moment.
All of those people were indulging in a kind of aestheticism. They were dreaming a theory of art that was airy and godlike, and Andy finally pulled the rug out from everybody by saying, you know, this thing is a thing we call a painting, and it makes no difference what it is, and anybody can paint it. In fact, nobody has to paint it. My assistant can paint it.